This is the book of Luke, chapter 21, verse 9. In verse 9 in the book of Luke, in the Holy Scriptures, it reads, But ye shall but when ye shall hear of wars and commotions, and be not terrified, for these things must come to pass, but the end is not by and by. And this is the book of Matthew 24 and 6. In verse 6 in the book of Matthew to the Holy Scriptures, and it reads, And ye shall hear of wars and rumors of wars. And see that ye be not troubled, for all these things must come to pass, but the end is not yet. Matthew 24 and 7. For nation shall rise against nations, and kingdom against kingdoms. And there shall be famines and pestilence and earthquakes in diverse places. This is the book of Ezekiel, chapter 38, verse 1. And the word of the Lord came unto me, saying, Verse 2, Son of man, set thy face against Gog and the land of Magog, and the chief prince of Meshach and Tubal, and prophesy against him. Verse 3, and said, Thus saith the Lord, Yahweh thy power, behold, I am against thee, O God, the chief prince of Meshach and Tubal. Verse 4, in the book of Ezekiel, 38th chapter, verse 4, and it reads, And I will turn thee back until I put hooks into thy jaws, and I will bring thee forth, and all thy armies and horsemen, and all of them clothed with all sorts of armor, even with great companies, with bucklers and shields, all of them handling swords. Verse 5, Persia, Ethiopia, and Libya, and with them all of them with shields and helmets. Verse 6, Gomer and all his bands, the house of Togarmah of the north quarters, and all his bands, and many people with thee. Ezekiel 38 and 7, Be thou prepared and prepare for thyself, thou and all thy companies that are assembled with thee, and be thou in guard unto them. Shalom. First and foremost, I'd like to give all praises and glory and honor to Yahweh Ba'ashem, Yahweh Shah, Ba'ashem, Wakar Kardash. Double honors to the elders, apostles, the great millstone, preaching the word truthfully and sincerely. And shalom to the Akim, scattered through the four corners of the globe, preaching the word truthfully and sincerely. And shalom to the Akim, scattered through the four corners of the globe, preaching the word truthfully and sincerely. And shalom to the Akim, that be like unto the speckled bird, preaching the word truthfully and sincerely. And I say shalom to y'all Akim out there. And this is a news article I'm about to bring out. It relates to those scriptures that I just brought out for the introduction of these sit-down lesson for today. And this is the first article, and this is from MSN.com, and it goes into, the increase of the wars and rumors of wars. And this was from ASUA, I believe, and this was published by Laura Martin Singh Juan, published about 8 hours ago. And the highlight of this news article reads, Fear in the U.S. of a major offense by Russia. A new update from the Institute for War Studies seeks to shed some light on how the Russian invasion of Ukraine may be involved in the coming days and weeks. The U.S.-based think tank is analyzing the Operation Pause announced by the Russian Ministry of the Defense has concluded that a major offense could be imminent. Continue on with the news article. And it says, according to the ISW, the pause announcement by the Kremlin may not last long, but when the Russian commander decides that it managed to adequately prepare for the resumption of a major offense, it will probably resume if with a greater number of troops and greater decision. And it says, how can Ukraine defend against further advances? There are concerns that the Ukraine armies may be forced to respond to a renewed enemy advance towards Seversky. The Russian military has far more trained personnel. They could use the Seversky offense to launch full offense towards Slavansky and Kramastorsky, if I pronounce those names right, the key Ukraine-held locations in the Donetsk region. Russian troops has little success southwest of Seversky and continuing their offense west of Linsky, of the ISW reported. It says, however, Russian forces use artillery bombarded the towns. But it says Russia continues to attack and bombard our lands with the same intensity as before. So yeah, that goes to show you the increase of wars and rumors of wars, because you're going to have news articles or the editors going to write articles and relates to a potential military offense from Russia, interferes from some Americans, but not all, because modern day Babylon got that pride, arrogancy, think nothing gonna happen to them or whatever, or no type of imminent threat is coming towards their way, because you see still the pride of modern day Babylon, the Babylonians, But that's off another topic. But I was just reading this article. It shows you, in the last days, you're gonna see the Heavenly Father's gonna put in the spirit of these Russians to get back into that USSR mode type, and that's what we're seeing. Even though they say from the beginning when the invasion had started, it was mostly a military operation. And, so, that goes to show you the increase of wars, rumors of wars in the last days, And then this is a potential rumor, a potential fear in the U.S. of a major offense by Russia, because the Heavenly Father is going to stir up these Russians, get back into that war type mindset, that Cold War type mindset, because they've been training for this for quite a while now, especially during the winter time and the cold conditions, because those Russians and Eastern European soldiers, they fully equipped to these wars and they fully trained. That's why you've been seeing throughout last year and all to this year of these nations are training, joint exercise training, military exercise trainings, rocket launching, missile launching tests, hypersonic missile tests, the ICBM military missile launches as well too, to the higher range, the short range and the long range as well too. So that goes to show you the increase of wars and rumors of wars increasing even more further and further and further. Even though it be on these news articles, it's just be just a rumor or just an opinion. But that goes to shows you, as I brought out that scripture of the introduction of the sit-down lesson, because you're going to see more and more than ever more increase of wars and rumors of wars, because you're going to hear increases of these rumors of wars, that's just being a rumor in the news. You're gonna hear it, rumors of wars that's definitely becoming a reality. And we're seeing signs of that definitely becoming a reality as well too. 'Cause from what I've been hearing, the Russian-Ukraine situation, the is intensifying even more. And this is another article that I'm about to bring out. Another one, and it goes from the Iranians might potentially, if it's 100% true, from the White House administration, from what they are saying. That's why it says in the last days, according to the Holy Scriptures, you're going to hear a lot of wars and rumors of wars increasing in the last days, more and more and more than ever. Even though we're so used to hearing these things in the news, but throughout the years and the months and days, it been increasing more and more and more. And I'm about to bring out another news article. Let's see. Yep, here it goes right here. And it says, because we already, we already know that the tension between the Russia-Ukraine situation is intensifying back up once again in different regions in Ukraine. And this is a news article. This is another potential rumor of war. This is a news article from MSN.com, and it's from the USA Today, and it was published by Katie Winston, Waskin, if I pronounce the name right, and Jorge L. Ortiz from the US Today, published about 54 minutes ago, supporting journalism, I believe. And the highlight of this news article, and it reads from USA Today, which was published about 54 minutes ago. And the highlight of the news article, and it reads in the news, Iran to supply Russia hundreds of drones. It says, and it makes sense too, because Russia and Iran, they have that mutual respect for one another, which is China, Russia, and Iran. They're going to be potential allies in these last days, and you're starting to see that increase a little bit more, because I remember either that China and Russia, they was going to find ways to find economic mutual respect between one another when it comes to the economy and military cooperation as well too. And yeah, they had a recent article of that as well too, with China trying to increase more and more relations with Russia, and they're gonna increase relations with Iran as well too. So this story, this might be true. So I'm gonna read it anyway. It says Iran to supply Russia hundreds of drones. It says the White House said at least six were killed at a Russian strike. Civilians in Kharkiv. Live Ukraine updates. And it says the Biden administration says on Monday that Iranian government is preparing to provide Russia with several hundred drones, including some with military capability, as the Russian continues its offense in eastern Ukraine. It says the National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan said intelligence indicates that Iran could train Russian forces on the drones, also known as the unmanned area vehicles, or the UAVs, as soon as this month. It's unclear whether Iran has delivered any of these UAVs already, Sullivan said. It says Sullivan appeared at the White House press briefing, brought up Russia's reliance on Iran for military equipment as an example on how Russian fighting in Ukraine is coming at a cost of sustaining of its own weapons. And it says the National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan, our information indicates that the Iranian government is preparing to provide Russia with up to several hundreds of UAVs, including military weapon capabilities, and UAVs is on an expendable timeline. Silverman appeared at the White House press briefing, brought up Russia's reliance on Iran for military equipment and an example on how Russian fighter in eastern Ukraine is coming at a cost to sustain its own weapons. The White House disclosed a potential Russian-Iran cooperation comes after President Joe Biden heads to the Middle East on Tuesday. Right, because I read another article since Joe Biden heading over there. I believe the over there in Yemen, they escalating crisis over there, um, famine crisis and war crisis as well too. You know, and it says I just want to add a little note to that since Joe Biden visited over there in the Middle East. You know, it says Joe Biden heads to the Middle East on Tuesday with visit lines up in Israel and Saudi Arabia. Right, because I believe both sides, the Palestinians and Israel, they was waiting on the arrival for Joe Biden as well too. So that's why I guess it has that right there with Israel and Saudi Arabia, his visit in the Middle East. It says in which Iran's nuclear program will be amongst topics of discussion. It says the latest developments. Ukrainian billionaire Reinit Alkamtov said he's pulling out of the media business so he won't be able, as a Goshkis system capability management group, will transfer media holds to the government, including the Ukraine TV channel and Ukrainian 24 news channel as Kaviv Independence reports. As a large private investors in Ukraine, I have repeatedly said I was not and will not be in, I don't know, I guess that's probably something else. Yeah, that's something else, Salakia. It says, skip down to another one. It says Russia latest attacks on residence area killed at least 6. The missile struck residents in the area of Ukraine's second largest city on Monday, killing at least 6 people and injuring 31 others as Russia pounds Kharkiv and its surrounding in its continued assault on civilians despite pause on its ground offense. Missile hit a school and residential building, almost aiming for a warehouse, according to the Telegram post by Kharkiv region Governor O.C. Halbaz. If I pronounce his name right, all exclusively on civilian objects. This is a absolutely SN. As he said, he added that those injuries were among the children 4 through 16. Also, Monday, the state emergency service of Ukraine said the death toll of the Ukraine weekend shelling that destroyed 3 apartment buildings in Donetsk's Providence town of Chavis Yard rose to 30, and 9 people have been pulled out of the rubble. As Kremlin continues the efforts to claim to entitle Donbass as the East, in the East, its soldiers, really the British military said troops have been on active duty since Russia invaded on February the 24th, and President Vladimir Putin has ordered a area of rest for them, but the bombarding goes on. So, yep. So, yeah, these wars, rumors of wars increasing, Then you have the potential, as I was reading on down through the article, as I mentioned, the potential cooperation and allegiance with, Iran and Russia, And I'm going to bring out another news article, and this is going to be the final third one. If I can be able to see it. Yeah, and this is another news article right here in regards to Korea and China and Russia. And this news article raised from Tom O'Connor was from Newsweek, published about 5 hours ago. In the highlight of this news article, it reads, Korea emerged as a nuclear front line in U.S. rivalry with China and Russia. It says, as the United States rivalry with China and Russia simmers across the globe, an old flashpoint threatens to erupt on the Korean Peninsula, where unresolved tensions have re-emerged as a specter of nuclear war remains ever present. And it says, since North Korea's first nuclear test in 2006, which has been a while back, the United Nations Security Council includes permanent members of China, Russia, and the United States have unanimously adopted 10 resolutions condemning such military activity, the supporting of international sanctions against countries officials known as the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, the DPRK. This unity was sheltered for the first time on May the 26th when Belgium, Moscow, vetoed Russia's proposal to push Pyongyang's for recent missile tests. The statement mirrors the recent failed attempts by the U.S. and its allies in the UN, condemning Russia for the war it launched on Ukraine 3 months ago. Early, President Joe Biden administration has attempted to sway China away from Russia, but even bigger geopolitical competition between Beijing and Washington was served to reinforce the comprehensive strategic partnership between the two rivals of the U.S. The result has a breakdown of decades of diplomacy seeking to bring peace to one of the first deadliest conflicts of the Cold War. The factions forms along familiar lines. A northern triangle consists of China, North Korea, and Russia on the one hand, and the southern triangle made up of Japan, South Korea, and the United States on the other. A South Korean speaking to Newsweek on the conditions of anomaly said strained ties between the U.S. and China always have a negative impact on the internal inter-Korean re-approachment and also the denuclearization issues, but that the issue events reveals that even deeper crises have arisen. Very clearly, we see the UN Security Council doesn't work after Ukraine, and China doesn't support any more sanctions against DPRK, which is Democratic Republic of Korea. The South Korean official said that a huge disaster of the Democratic Republic of Korea nuclear issues as a inter-Korean relations, right? Because you got North Korea and South Korea. They relations between one another is kind of rocky. Then you got United States, Japan, and South Korea has had their little allies with one another going against North Korea for testing missile launches. And I believe it was one report, I forgot what, it was an Asian person spoke about it. They was a warning of a potential NATO, Asian type NATO, because you already got NATO of the European countries and the allies with Ukraine and the United States as well too, because Asian countries might form their own type of NATO. So, because you already got tensions in the South China Sea, then you got United States, Japan, South Korea, against North Korea with their nuclear missile tests. And Japan, United States, and South Korea had their nuclear tests of its own. They were like, hey, we can counter that from North Korea. So, yeah, the tensions are definitely increasing, re-emerging more than ever. It says, it's very clear we see that UN security doesn't work after Ukraine. China doesn't support any of the sanctions against DPRK. The South Korean official said that that's a huge disaster of the DPRK nuclear issue, and even they enter Korean relations. And while ridding the North Korea of its prized nuclear weapons remains the official aim of the U.S. and South Korea, and the South Korean official worries that a war in Europe and a worsened geopolitical struggle for influence in Asia may have set the goal back irreversibly, especially as Russian cruisers came nearly 3 decades after a Kyiv agrees to return to the Soviet era. Nuclear weapons deployed on Ukraine's soil, exchange for security assurance from Moscow. Definitely from the Ukraine situation, we fear North Korea will never give up their nuclear weapons. Same thing with Iran, same thing. Because we know Iran is not going to give up their nuclear capability, just as North Korea, they're not going to give up their nuclear capabilities. It says North Korea will never give up their nuclear weapons, the official said. And then also caused some Chinese calculations when the U.S. put some pressure on China on economic securities and national sovereignty issues. It says, while much attention has been given to the questions of Taiwan, and South Korean officials argue that when it comes to security concerns, Beijing may view the neighboring Slovakia for a second. Oh, Joey in the bathroom. Oh, Joey in the bathroom. No. No. Oh, you finna get ready to dip?
Yeah.
Alright, dude.
Well, I'll call you when I get some drinks.
Alright.
Look.
Alright, man. I was lucky about that. I was talking to my brother. We'll continue on with the reading. It says, while much attention has been given to questions of Taiwan, South Korean officials said that when it comes to security concern, Beijing may view the neighboring Korean peninsula in a similar fashion as Moscow does enter Eastern Europe, saying that this is some kind of situation like Ukraine and Russia. So if tensions continue to escalate, Officials said China has more willingness to take some control of the Korean Peninsula. North Korea has always maintained unique relations with China and Russia. It says the two nations were supporting it during the 1950s Korean War against the U.S. and the UN-backed South Korea. The conflict was among the first to test the viable of the UN less than 2 years after it came into existence and saw the first direct fighting between the U.S. troops and those of the newly established People Republic of China, the PRC, in a 3-year war that ended without peace for the two Koreas. Washington and Beijing would overcome tensions to establish diplomatic relations in 1979 and the fall of the Soviet Union in the 1990s. Right, because that was in the early 1990s. And it says the conflict between seen as frozen to observers across the globe, even if it remains vital to residents of the peninsula. Any compliments that may have been generated collapsed when North Korea demonstrated its nuclear prowess against the wishes of even a China and Russia repeated attempts to denuclearize for peace dialogue repeatedly unraveled as recent as 2 years ago. Then former President Donald Trump, and then South Korean President Moon Jae-in made historical inroads with North Korea Supreme Leader Kim Jong-un, but Pyongyang reverted to hostile after talks ultimately broke down, leaving a little room for engagement. While they tried to knock on North Korea's door, we don't have any hidden agenda, he says. Let's talk. Another South Korean official, who also not to be named, told Newsweek after the recent missile fires, which of course condemned in the strongest terms. We have never shut the door of diplomacy and dialogue. While the controversial South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol, who took office in May, sought to break his liberal predecessor peace first approach into the inter-Korean ties. The new administration has continued to seek talks and offers assistance without conditions, according to South Korean officials said. North Korea really think this through and take up our offer for dialogue. The second Korean official said war is not an option. The only way forward is diplomacy. But the absence of any breakthrough, Seoul is investing its own national defiance capabilities like never before. These including new missile systems that South Korea troops have showcased it, sometimes on joint maneuvers with the U.S. in response to the South Korea recent uptick in missile activities that both the U.S. and South Korea officials suspected of the prelude to their seventh nuclear test. Right, previous this was the sixth one, now it's the seventh one. Recently, as of right now, it says there have been discussions in South Korea about the country obtaining its own nuclear weapons, or at least deploying those of the U.S. As was the case through much of the Cold War, popular support for obtaining such weapons of mass destruction has steadily increased in recent years, hitting some 71% in the polls by the Chicago Council on February the 21st, 3 days before the Russian attack on Ukraine. And it says, and while the issues remain a topic of debate for Seoul, there is a consensus on the threat posed by Pyongyang, its own increasingly advanced arsenal, especially as Kim set out, which is Kim Jong Un, set to develop not only larger platforms but smaller tactical ones that could pose an even more imminent danger to South Korea. The North Korea threat is imminent, is there our doorsteps. The second South Korea official said, we really want to deal with this. And while this official said it may be South Korea who are the most direct affected by the issue, the officials argue that at the same time, it is also everyone's problem. It's China's problem, it's Russia's problem, and the second official added that we are trying to convey our neighbors to international communities. So Beijing and Moscow continues to trend on blocking the U.S. push for even more strengthened measures against Pyongyang. The second South Korean official said he felt that we feel the pressure from other countries involving with the issue. It says both China and Russia have long resist outside pressures to change their stance in the violent state of international affairs that has emerged since the war in Ukraine began. One force has only forced Westerners and Easterners blocked far apart. It says two countries seem independable of a era in which the U.S. could impose dominance over international security order. This skimmage, however, has not stopped the U.S. from appealing to China for support in attempts to denuclearize North Korea. We have reportedly made it clear that we will cooperate with the PRC where we can. In a statement, department spokesperson told the Newsweek will remain committed to seeking cooperation with the PRC on the Democratic Republic of North Korea. Of Korea, not North Korea. Korea, I meant to say Slovakia. It says a flurry of engagements between the two officials from Beijing and Washington this year. Chinese special representation on Korean political affairs, Liu Zhaiming, met with the U.S. officials representations for North Korea, Sung Kim, on April 5th in Washington. In this meeting, State Department spokesperson said that the U.S. side emphasized that U.S. and the PRC have a very important shared interest in maintaining stability on the Korean Peninsula. And it says Beijing shares the goal of complete denuclearization on the Korean Peninsula. The spokesperson added that the SR Kims looks to forward working with Liu and his colleagues in Beijing to make progress towards that goal. Hopes for cooperation between the two leaders, world powers in the area, were also conveyed by the White House National Security Jake Sullivan. It says during the meeting last month, Geneva with China's Central Foreign Affairs Commission's Director Yang Jiechi's a senior Biden administration official told reporters at the time that Sullivan made it very clear, believe this is an area where the United States and China should able to work together. Working with China at the moment, think that's a possibility. It might, but how the way current tensions is going on, I believe China might have more cooperations and more unity with China, with Russia and Iran. more than the United States, I believe. But you know, it they might come to some progress of a conclusion of this regarding matter right here. But continuing on with the reading, it says, but the senior administration official also said that the U.S. side raised concern regarding China's recent voting record on the issue at the UN, and these concerns were echoed, I meant to say, by the State Department spokesperson with whom the Newsweek spoke. It says the Democratic Republic of Korea ballistic missile launches are a clear violation. The UNSCR prohibiting the DPRK's ballistic missile deployment. The spokesperson said it apprehended a number of DPRK's ballistic missile launches this year, and the stability that brings to the Korean Peninsula are no one's interest. We are continuing to urge the PRC and Russia to complete, fulfill their obligations under the DPRK UN Security Council with resolutions that the UN Security Council unanimously adopted. The spokesperson added. The Biden administration also pushing for China to crack down on other areas of its relationship with North Korea, which I highly doubt. Because as I was reading early on in the article, because China and North Korea, they relationship and cooperation with one another, it had increased more than ever. So, trying to tell them to calm down and crack down relationships between North Korea, I think that's highly unlikely to happen. So, continuing on with the reading. It says Beijing can also do more to combat the DPRK sanctions evasion efforts to the PRC coastal waters to replicate North Koreans' labor's earnings incomes in its territory and to shut down the procurement networks, the spokesperson said. It remains a paramount for China's to maintain security along the border across which the People's Liberation Army fought the largest war in the country's history under the Communist Party rule, and China's officials see that this is a mutual guard amongst nations. It says China always believed that maintaining peace and stability on the Korea's peninsula and achieve denuclearization on the peninsula and shared interests of all parties and international communities. Liu Pinggu, spokesperson for the China embassy in Washington, told Newsweekly, "We hope all parties concerned will stay calm," which highly doubt, highly doubt, especially with the tensions increasing right now with with Japan and South Korea and the United States, and with North Korea. So the tensions on all parties are not going to be cool anytime soon. And I'm going to read it again. We hope all parties concerned will stay calm, work in the same direction, refrain from moves of rhetoric that may be perceived as a proactive, and jointly advance the process of political settlement on the issue on the Korean Peninsula, Liu Pinggu added. It says both China and Russia have called on the U.S. to ease sanctions, which I highly doubt. They're going to keep on putting more sanctions on Iran. They're going to keep on putting more sanctions on North Korea, and it's affiliated as well too. So, but China and Russia have called on the U.S. to ease the sanctions on North Korea, which they continue not going to do. rather than tightening them since 2019. As the U.S. North Korea peace talks began to fall apart, the powers have put forth a draft resolutions their own. One with that would remove bans. Would their own one would uh, remove their own bans for preventing North Korea exporting goods such as statues, seafood, textiles, and would raise a cap on importing refinance. Right, because that's be part of the sanctions as well too, which is the economic sanctions. These measures were billed as a necessary to ease the burden on North Korea. Right, on potentially easing the sanctions, I believe it says as of lately it's been not seem that been not the case because North Korea is gonna fire off missiles and still gonna fully trust in their nuclear capability. And it says at a time when the country was going through a several economic hardship that have been noted by Kim as a high-profile speech and meeting. And it says with the UN at a standstill, however, Beijing and Moscow also shores up their military cooperation, including most recently a series of joint drills in the Pacific. The 2 days before the Security Council veto in May, and just as Biden was in the region on visiting to meet the leaders of South Korea and Japan, the U.S. and its allies sought to rally efforts to counter China and Russia during the recent summit held by the G7 and NATO, where the threat posed uh, by North Korea was also discussed among member states. So, I ain't gonna read all the rest of it because this is a long article. So that goes to show you with, the increase of tensions of on all different sides. And all different sides of these nations are allies going against adversaries as well too. You got the North Korea, you know, down with China, and then you got North Korea, a currently adversary from Japan, South Korea, and the United States. Because with the recent a month or two ago with the missile launch testings from North Korea, and they see that as a credible threat from North Korea. And then Japan, South Korea, and the United States, they did nuclear missile tests of their own to counter the missiles testing from North Korea. They see that as a potential imminent threat. So these things like this, as you hear in the news, these are continuing to more build up of the wars and rumors of wars. Salakia for reading that long article because I just want to get further deeper into it because I know I brought out 2 articles and this third one was very long, but that goes to show you the continuing in-depth of what's really going on in regards to the wars and rumors of wars increasingly, the commotions of wars, as I brought it out in Luke 21 and 9, and then the wars and rumors of wars in Matthew 24 and 6 to verse 7, and the different kingdoms increasingly going against one another as well too, and the different kingdoms increasing. So these wars and rumors of wars is constantly, consistently building up in the last days, and it's going to furthermore increase more and more and more. As as I was reading further on down the article, I believe it was from the I forgot who he was. He was a spokesperson. He was trying to see of all sides. Hopefully they can come to some certain agreement if they can calm tensions down, which is highly unlikely, especially right now at the moment, because tensions are increasing on high right now as we speak. You know, with the South China Sea in the Korean Peninsula, tensions increasing, especially in the South China Sea, and then with the China, Russia, and Iran thing, you know, with the South Korea and United States and Japan, and tensions with potentially China and North Korea, but mostly North Korea with their missile launching tests, with their ICBM nuclear tests, and there's 7 nuclear tests as well too, increasingly, you know. So, that goes to show you the increase of these wars and rumors of wars, increasing more than ever, Salakia. So yeah, so I'm gonna end it with that, and I hope this lesson was edifying through the spirit, power, grace, and mercy of Yahweh Yahushua. And first and foremost, I'd like to give all praises and glory and honor to Yahweh, Ba'ashem, Yahweh Shai, Ba'ashem, Wakar Kardash. Double honors to the elders, apostles, a great millstone, pushing his word truthfully and sincerely. And shalom to the Akim, scattered through the four corners of the globe, pushing the word truthfully and sincerely. And shalom to the Akim, scattered through the four corners of the globe, that be like unto the speckled bird, pushing the word truthfully and sincerely. And until next time, I will say shalom and ball.